And just like that, Snowfall is over. It's over. Hey, what's up and hello? This is the Chris Nicole giving you my views on life, love, and the world of entertainment through my eyes. And if I sound crazy, yeah, it's because it's early in the morning. I haven't had my coffee yet. I watched Snowfall last night and I wanted to sleep on it before I did my review. So, with that being said, this is the series finale of Snowfall, season 6, episode 10, The Struggle. Whew, this episode was triggering for me, y'all, and I will definitely explain why later. So, the first scene we see Franklin, he calls V and tells her what happened with Sissy killing Teddy. And of course, she's freaking out. He's crying, and he doesn't understand why his mother did this because, of course, he's not in his right mind. And then we see him at the bar and the bartender gives him a drink because the bartender clearly sees that Franklin is out of it. And they do a close up on the shot that the bartender gave him and a close up on Franklin's lips touching the shot. And I instantly knew then Franklin is about to become an alcoholic. He's about to become his father. That was very symbolic on taking his first drink. And once he took his first drink, as we see later on in the episode, he continues to drink. So, and again, typically it's that saying that you become what you despised. And he did not like his father. He hated his father in many ways. And now it looks like he's about to become his father. So the CIA calls him and pretty much tells him to drop off Ruben or he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. And Franklin does what he's told and drops off Ruben. And I honestly thought they were going to arrest Franklin, but they didn't. They actually let him go as long as he, dropped off Ruben. He did his job, and we all know where Ruben is now. So next we see a scene between Leon and Franklin. Whew. And it definitely gives you that vibe of the last become first and the first become last. I think that's the saying that how things have just completely changed. Where we never thought Franklin would be in this position, and we never thought Leon would be in his position. So Franklin is begging for money like he's a straight dope fiend. You would think Franklin was on crack at this point, but he's not. He just truly is out of his mind and he's begging for money. Leon tells him he has $3 million. Mind you, he's already given Franklin 500,000. And so Leon says, why do you think your mother did what she did? And of course, Franklin, that's a trigger. She flipped out. I don't know. Like she lost her mind. And Leon said, no, she sacrificed herself so this could be over, so we could be safe. Franklin doesn't want to hear it. He even gets to the point where he threatens Leon and tells him that either he's going to give Franklin the money or Franklin's going to take it. But Leon's crew's not having it. Leon's crew's behind him like, I wish you would. So at that point, Leon looks heartbroken, and I totally get it because he realizes that, Sissy was right. Like, Franklin is gone. Like, there's no return for him. He's gone. Next, Franklin goes to court for Sissy's hearing, and she truly goes Black Panther revolutionary on their asses and says guilty for killing an agent who flooded my community and aided an illegal war. Went off, okay? Like, and literally, of course, they were like, order in the court, order in the court. Like, this lady is crazy. She don't look crazy at all. She look like she is in her right mind. But of course, to say that, order in the court, order in the court. And so with that, they pretty much say no bail. And interesting enough, the DA's office is like, she's a threat to society. We don't want her out. And I'm thinking, she's never had a record in her life. She's never done anything bad. So the fact that she just randomly kills this guy and you're talking about she's a threat to society, so they said no bail. Okay, so with that, Franklin leaves, and the police officer, the black police officer that's been around for seasons at this point, he was actually friends with Andre, and he's the one who told the reporter about how, Franklin got off on a murder, and pretty much he finds out that all of the stuff about Franklin disappeared. And so he follows Franklin and pretty much questions Franklin, like, with all of the stuff that's going on and how his own mother is trying to expose the CIA. And so Franklin is like, my mother is crazy. If you got something on me, do something, get out of my face. And then he has the audacity to call the police officer an Uncle Tom. And I'm like, if anyone is the Uncle Tom, it's you, bruh. You the Uncle Tom. Like, seriously, like, you are the Uncle Tom in the situation. So next we see Wanda telling Leon that she's going back to Ghana for good and she only has enough money for a one-way ticket. And Leon pretty much respects her wishes and gives her money to set up in Ghana. And she starts to cry because she's like, well, are you going to at least try to stop me? But he doesn't. And I think at that point, I mean, I understand she was hurt, but I think that was the ultimate love for her, that you do what you need to do because I love you that much that I want you to get out of here and set up and do what you need to do. So, nice little small scene between them, which is the last scene between Leon and Wanda for this series. But yeah, he said, do what you got to do. So, all right. So, we see Franklin talking to his mother, the first scene between them when she's in jail. And while Franklin is gone, so is Sissy. She is looking at Franklin like she doesn't even know who he is, that he is a complete stranger. At this point, Franklin is an addict for the money. We clearly see that, but he's literally has lost his mind, and every conversation is about him. Like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And he always tries to start it off like he's trying to be there for her. Oh, well, we, plead temporary insanity, X, Y, and Z. But why did you do that? Why? You couldn't wait 10 seconds? Sissy got her ass up and was like, I'm not trying to hear this, and left. Like, it has to be bad when the mother, and that is your only child, is at a point where she realizes her son is gone and she wants nothing to do with him. That's bad. So next scene, Franklin is at the Saint house and he gets a visit from good old Paul Davis. And we know who Paul Davis was. I think we started seeing him in season 3. And he comes to Franklin about how, he was told that Franklin is selling his stake in the Spring Street building. And at that point, Franklin tunes everything out Paul Davis is saying because he realizes that V reached out to Paul Davis. And instead of considering the offer, his pride again, and his ego and him wanting to win, because at this point, when we look at how much money, because the way that Franklin is operating, you would think they have zero money. But we later find out that in a bank account, there was a good amount of money. And with the money that Leon gave him, that was enough money, especially in the 80s, to start a new life. Get the hell out of California, go somewhere down south or go somewhere else and start brand new. But again, he wanted to win. He was so obsessed that it didn't matter. He wanted all of his money, or he wanted millions on top of millions. He didn't even realize that he could really start brand new with what he currently had. So with that being said, next scene, we see Franklin going to the warehouse to confront V. And Franklin confronts her about Paul Davis. And at this point, he pretty much wraps his hands around V's neck. And he's not choking her, but he definitely is giving signs that, bitch, I'll do it if I need to. But pretty much says, don't you ever go behind my back. And at that point, as soon as he put hands on her, V became her mother, like straight up. She knew at that point her mother was right. Her eyes pretty much saw, like you could see in her eyes that she's like, my man is gone completely. Franklin sits down and says, well, I sold all of the South Central properties. And at first, I'm thinking maybe he got back with Paul Davis and made an agreement to sell the South Central properties to him. But no, you know who he sells them to? The slum landlord that Sissy used to work for. The one that they scared shitless when when that guy tried to threaten Sissy and Franklin. He sold the properties to him. And that was out of pure spite. It really was. It was out of pure spite for his mother, and the fact that he again had to be in control. He's not in his right mind when V was actually making the most realistic deal out of the situation. But as much as I didn't like V, and as much as I was like, she's a scammer, and where is she really going to go? Or like, once she realizes that money is not returning, what is she going to do? Once he put his hands on her, at that point, I get it, because her first priority is to protect that child in her stomach. And she didn't know what Franklin was going to do at that point. Hell, none of us knew what Franklin was going to do at that point. So, yeah, so even though I always felt like V was going to leave in the end, I get it. I get why she left. I really do. So next we see Sissy getting a visit from Leon. This was a beautiful scene. And Leon is telling her that he will keep the shelter open. And Sissy is asking about Wanda. And, Leon says, well, Wanda went back to Ghana. And so Sissy tells him you need to go to Ghana with your wife and to live his life and find out what his purpose is in life. And when he's really ready to come back to LA, then come back. And this powerful writing here, she says, Franklin is lost and it's one of the biggest tragedies of her life. However, Leon is one of her greatest surprises. And that just got me because, of course, we know in the beginning of the series, Leon always seemed like the one who was the F up. He was the one who was constantly in and out of juvie, in and out of jail, while Franklin was seen as the good guy, the more clean cut, the bougie one, so to speak, living in the house versus living in the projects. So the fact that Sissy said that she truly has altered her, like, both of them are her sons, but she is just truly like, you are the only one I can really count on to be successful at this point, because Franklin is not about to be successful in anything. So very touching scene. Next, Franklin goes to the bank and finds out that V took all the money, almost $800,000. And again, like I said, between $800,000 and $500,000, that is $1.3 million. And back in the 80s, $1.3 million, I would say now is probably what, $4 million, maybe even more than that. You could have really took that money, Franklin, and left. But again, pride and wanting to win. So at that moment, he knew V was gone forever. And then, of course, we see him in the car completely out of it. And he takes his second drink. But this time, it's not a shot, honey. It's a whole entire bottle. So, again, Franklin is turning into his father. So Franklin goes to visit Sissy again. And now he's trying to sell the Saint house. And he's begging and everything else. And, Sissy not saying anything to him, of course, because she realized Franklin is gone. And then Franklin completely disrespects his mother. Completely. Calls her all types of bitches and he hates her. And oh my gosh, like once he got to that point where he disrespected his mother, now granted, we know he disrespected his father, but because of how we saw his father in the beginning, I think a lot of people just let that go. But we all know who Sissy is to Franklin, and how if it wasn't for Sissy, Franklin wouldn't have a roof over his head. Like, she was the primary parent. So to literally go that far and disrespect your mother like that, I knew it wasn't going to end well. I just knew it was not going to end well. So he gets a page. This is like 3 months later, like after he goes off. 3 months later, and I'm probably going to be out of order, but after he goes off on his mom, he gets a page and Top Notch tells him that, he found Peaches, but not V. Because of course at that point he was like, she should have had the baby by now. And so Top Notch says, look, I'm done. And of course, Franklin is paranoid, like, who did you speak to? Sissy? You spoke to V? And he's like, no, I'm done because I'm done. But here, I got you what you want, which is Peaches. Okay. And so I knew if they were going to bring up Peaches in the beginning, we had to see Peaches before this series was over. And so, with that being said, he ends up going to this nice house. So clearly, Peaches did end up using some of that money, I guess, to have shelter. He goes to this nice house, finds Peaches. Peaches is high as hell, and pretty much Peaches tells him that, there is money in the safe. And before he can get, the code or whatever the case may be, it's kind of the same situation that Sissy did with Teddy. Before he can get any type of code, Franklin kills him. And so with that, we see him with another bottle of liquor, and he's calling, which interesting enough, we saw the yellow pages, and I'm like, dang, like, I remember yellow pages. Yeah, I'm that old. I remember yellow pages. Like now everything, of course, is by phone, but it used to be a time that you had to have, every house had the yellow pages so you could look up locksmith, electricians, or whatever the case may be. So he's in the yellow pages, and he calls a locksmith who, gosh, I wish he wouldn't have taken that call, but his name is Miguel. And Miguel comes in with a huge smile on his face, and he pretty much is like, yes, I can open his safe. And for whatever reason, Franklin is so out of his mind, he didn't realize that possibly there could be other people in the house. So while Miguel is literally trying to unlock the safe, a junkie comes into the room and pretty much says, who are you guys and where is Peaches? And Franklin's like, we're trying to help Peaches open up this safe. Next thing you know, the junkie loses his shit, screaming, looking for Peaches, and then all of a sudden we hear gunshots. And of course, Miguel at that point is realizing that I have made the biggest mistake of my life, literally. So Franklin comes back in, crazy, delirious, and he's like, look, I don't want to hurt you, but I need for you to open up this safe. They get the safe open. And we don't really know when Franklin is looking at the safe, inside the safe, what's going on, but you can tell there is shock and disappointment at the same time. He tells Miguel to count the money, and we only see there's a couple of stacks there and a couple of dollars. And Miguel says it's roughly about $12,000. Mind you, Peaches literally took $5 million. Okay. I don't know what the jump is on how long Peaches left versus when Franklin found him. I know they showed like 3 months later, but I don't know. But I'm like, let's just say if it was a year, you almost spent $5 million and you weren't dead. Like, how is that even possible? And I'm thinking the only way it's possible is he also was, of course, supplying his junkie friends, and then he bought the house. But I was just like, oh my gosh, like only $12,000. So at that point, Franklin turns into Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He gives the most evil villain Joker laugh, and then he starts screaming. And at that point, he realizes it's over. And remember, I said in my last review that the only way I could see him making out of, like, he can get out of this, if he finds Peaches and Peaches still has some of that money left. But I didn't think it was only going to be 12,000. I was thinking at least $1 million or something like that. But no. So he realizes it's over. And at this point, Miguel begins to cry because he realized he's dealing with a man who is completely insane. And Miguel's like, look, man, I had 3 kids. I won't tell anyone. I'll say that, some white junkie guy did this or whatever. And Franklin tells Miguel to put the money in his pocket and to go. And I wish that was it. Unfortunately, though, while Miguel is leaving, Franklin kills him. And at that point, I just said, I'm done with Franklin. Like, I literally was rooting for Franklin all the way until this episode. Like, he just completely lost it. And he knew he had lost it because as soon as he kills Miguel, he just falls to the floor. So, yeah. At that point, I don't think a lot of people cared what happened to Franklin at this point. So we see a scene and it says 2 years later, and we see that the DEA is still on Louie's ass. And so they end up going to a horse ranch to look for Louie, and they speak to this couple, and they're saying, look, this girl, her real name is Louie, and the couple is saying, yes, she was here for a couple of months, but she left. And we see that Louie is actually still at the ranch, holding her breath, like almost in tears, that these people are like protecting her. And I thought that was a sweet moment that they actually protected her. But then at the same time, I thought, I don't know. I didn't know if we were going to see Louis again. So the fact that they're leaving it open ended and we really don't know Louis' fate at this point tells me that she may be in a spinoff or there may be another spinoff, but we shall see. So that is the last official scene that we see of Louis hiding in a ranch and being protected by these people. And then we see our boy Gustavo. He is in Mexico and he is a wrestling coach. And while he's pretty much giving his tips and everything and coaching, he ends up going to a payphone and he ends up calling that answering service that only his woman had. And this time he hears a message. She says that they're fine. They're in North Carolina. North Carolina. The kids are great. She's great, but she really misses him. And we've seen Gustavo smile before, but the smile that he has on his face, like, it almost scared me because I was like, I don't think I've ever seen Gustavo smile like this before. He kept smiling to know that the family was okay. And she was saying she wanted to see him, but realistically, he can't come back to the States. But he's happy that, they're safe and they're protected. So with that, we then see another scene where it says 1 year later. So this is pretty much a sequence of from when we first saw the situation with Franklin becoming unhinged to 3 years later. It's roughly like 3 years later. And we see Leon looking at his old neighborhood and he gets approached by a new crew checking him, asking him who he's with. And they say cuz. And again, I don't know. I think at this point people know what cuz means, consider the fact that I'm from Cali. And, back in those days, especially, and even still now, but back in those days when people didn't know who you were and you came into their neighborhood, their thing was, who were you affiliated with? You blue, you red, who are you? So it's so funny though that within 3 years, and back in those days, people were truly rising and falling so fast in the crack epidemic. And that also means the dealers as well, the kingpins, because with how much Franklin and Leon ruled LA at the time when they were at their top, at their highest, the fact that 3 years later, these kids are approaching them like they don't know who Leon is and they don't know who's in that house shows how fast money was being made and how people also dropped just as fast by going to jail, getting killed, or whatever the case may be. So Leon, is on his grown man stuff and he's like, I grew up here on 46. Do you know anyone does anyone live in this house? And one of the guys is like, yeah, someone in there, but I don't think that's living. And so they laugh and just walk away. Leon knocks on the door, and I mean, it looks like a straight crack house at this point. There is notices from the city, pretty much talking about property taxes that need to be paid. And he's like, Frank, open up the door, and we see Franklin. Whoo, and he looked like he is straight out of a horror movie, okay? He comes to door, realizes it's Leon. He rushes Leon in the house because he's like, get in the house, get in the house. And he's like, was anybody watching? And Leon like, who would be watching? He was like, the city. Because, he knows he's at a point where he's even about to lose that house as well. And so Leon is just looking at his best friend like, I don't even know who this guy is. Like, I just don't know. I don't know who he is anymore. And so it's a true example of pride coming before the fall. And at this point, Franklin has fallen to the gutter. And so with that, Franklin is Alton Jr. He truly is Alton's son. And with that, it's so funny how Franklin tells Leon, like, I know your bougie ass don't want to stay in this house. And I'm like, oh, wow. Because remember, Leon used to call Franklin bougie because, Franklin had it better than Leon. Leon grew up in the projects with a mother who really didn't care about him. And Sissy took care of Franklin, bought a house, and really bought him almost everything he practically wanted within her, range of what she could afford. So with that, they're walking, and Franklin is they having their little friend moment, but talking about, hey, Wanda, is she back at her with her first love, implying that she's still on crack. And at that point, Leon says, no, but she's good. Marriage is hard. So it almost implies they're not together or they're going through some stuff. But then he says she's trying to get into the music business. And Franklin's like, you're shitting me, right? And at that point, I said, aha, because the spinoff is supposed to be about what the aftermath of LA, like going into the 90s. And, for anyone who really knows the history, late 80s, early 90s is when the evolution of gangster rap really came out. Like with NWA and so many other people, like that's when it came out. And of course, the gangster rap, and I would even say the revolutionary rap, came at that time, especially towards the end of the crack epidemic. And, people were really expressing themselves like no other way that they've ever expressed themselves on albums and in music. So I find that interesting that he said that. And I was like, I wonder if in the spinoff we're going to see like the evolution of rap on the West Coast and how it played a part in what we saw in our neighborhoods. So we see them going to Cho's, and that takes us back again to the first episode and how, Leon is talking, dropping some knowledge on Franklin, and Franklin is not really paying attention. And he's like, look, you got some money. And so with that, Leon is, of course, heartbroken, but he gives Franklin money. Franklin goes into Cho's to get some liquor. And it's so crazy because I'm like, I know Cho's probably looking at Franklin like, oh my gosh, like, like this is crazy. But with that, they're walking back to the neighborhood. Franklin is drinking. He's pretty much saying, he's paranoid. He's saying that people were constantly like listening in on his phone. He called the CIA saying that he was on talk, and all of a sudden everything stopped. And so with that, next thing you know, they see the police officers going into his house to pretty much take over the house, because at this point they're like, it's over. Like, you haven't paid your property taxes. Like, he can no longer go into the house. Leon's like, look, I can fix it. I'll pay the property taxes. And Franklin's like, no. He was like, do you see any chains around my neck? Like, I'm free. Like, I'm doing this my way, not your way, not their way. I'm doing this my way. And the saddest part of this scene, but also it was very, let me just get to it. So the saddest part is Franklin says, you are my best friend. And he starts to cry and he says, you've always been my best friend and I'm proud of you. And then Leon starts to cry. And the reason why I got emotional is because, of course, it was the ending, but at the same time, typically when you see people like Franklin in your neighborhood who have really fallen like that, they don't at least express out loud that they're proud of people who are able to get out. If anything, they're hating on their asses and they're saying negative stuff. But the fact that Franklin took that time to really say, I'm proud of you, I definitely felt like that was a great scene, because he could at least acknowledge that you did it the right way. To a certain extent, you were able to keep your sanity and get out and turn all of this stuff that we did to our neighborhood and try to create it into a positive and to help people that we pretty much helped destroy. And then with that, Franklin walks down the same street that him and Leon and Kev were playing on, the same street in the first scene of the pilot, where they're going down the street playing with each other. And we see that this is in 1983 and it's all jokes and laughs with his two best friends. This time we see Franklin walking down the street by himself, Leon is calling him, but Franklin's not listening. He ignores him. He looks back one time, but then he just keeps going. Oh my gosh. Triggering, triggering, triggering. One, however, it was poetic. And I know people are saying, I don't like the way this ended. You good writers are not going to give you what is predictable or what everyone is expecting. Everyone expected for Franklin to either die or to go to jail. They did not expect Franklin to become a bum and truly end up like his father. Okay. And this is why I say it's poetic, because when we look at the times of the 80s and times of the 90s or even 70s, when everyone talks about these drug kingpins and to a certain extent even still praise them, they're talking about the ones who did football numbers in jail and came out, or the ones who are still doing time in jail, or the ones who have been killed and they can't speak on anything. And they're almost still talking about the high life and when they were literally at their highest of high and how they were the man or the woman in the streets. No one wants to talk about the guy or the girl who at one point was at the highest of highs, who literally hit rock bottom. And what I mean by rock bottom is not jail or even death. Rock bottom is even worse than death or jail, that people don't even recognize you or respect you anymore because you have just become a complete bum or alcoholic or crackhead. There are plenty of stories like that, and no one wants to talk about that story. I guess it's too depressing, but that's a real story. No one wants to talk about that. And I love that they did this because we have so many in our communities that has so much potential, and it was so promising, like they had so much going for themselves, who you don't even recognize them anymore. And that those people in our community are the ones that are the most heartbreaking, not the ones that we constantly saw kind of mess up, which is why I think a lot of times people thought Leon was going to be that one. But Franklin he didn't come from a two-parent household, but his mother did everything she could to shield him and protect him. And the reason why I said it's triggering is because just personal stories. Um, I literally have had plenty of people in my family who were crackheads or drug addicts or were alcoholics. Okay. And interesting enough, the ones that became crackheads, alcoholics, heroin addicts, whatever, all of them came from two-parent households. None of them grew up in the projects. Literally, none of them grew up in the projects. Their parents both worked and bought homes to secure their family. And they ended up being the junkies. And it just shows you that how even sometimes when you come from a good family, the streets calling you can be a lot stronger than what your parents teach you or tell you. So I think with that, that's why it was triggering, because I'm looking at Franklin and I'm looking at, unfortunately, some of my aunts and uncles, and I'm like, yeah, I damn sure remember those times. And some of them was able to make it out and some of them didn't. Some of them did die on the streets. It was a sad situation. It was very triggering for me, but it's reality. And I think it was very poetic for Dave to end it in that way. It was poetic because it makes you say, you know what? This is reality. This is the aftermath of what the drug game can do to you. You always want to talk about the ones who go to jail, get out, and they're trying to, start their life again, but they're in their right mind. Franklin, in my opinion, did suffer a mental breakdown and a mental disorder. In my opinion, he kind of was operating like he was schizophrenic. And we all know that people can develop being schizophrenic over time, especially during stressful situations or whatever the case may be. He definitely had a mental disorder, especially towards the end. But yeah, it was poetic. It was sad. Of course, we didn't want to see him end in that way, but it's reality. It is. And so I'm going to miss Snowfall, and I'm probably going to create a big sin, or say a big sin right now, that I would have to say Snowfall has surpassed The Wire for me. And here's why. The Wire, in my opinion, the last season wasn't as good. Season 5, because I think there was 5 seasons. 5, it wasn't as good. as Snowfall, which season 6 was amazing. And then also with The Wire, season 2 was my least favorite season. It really just didn't have that impact like the other seasons did. Whereas Snowfall, every season had a purpose. Every season was a banger. So yeah, Snowfall has surpassed The Wire, and I know that I thought I would never say that, but I'm gonna have to say it. Snowfall is number one for me now. I'm gonna miss it. Bravo to the writers. Bravo to the acting. Damson Idris, I wish he would get an Emmy. I hope he does, but he hasn't gotten the Emmy. I don't think he's even gotten an Emmy nomination the whole time he was on Snowfall. But that man is brilliant. Bravo. Bravo to all the actors and actresses. But yeah, that's Snowfall. And this is a long video. I know it is, but I had to get everything out in this situation. Yeah, sad, but very typical in our communities. Franklin's story is so many stories in our communities, and they don't want to talk about those stories. But anywho, like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments below. What did you think about Snowfall? And I will see you on my next video. Peace.